Can we start? Yasmat jatam jagat sarvam yasminyeva praliyate yenedam dharyate chaiva tasmai jnanatmane namaha Ishvaro gururatmeti murti bheda vibhagine vyomavat vyapta dehaya dakshinamurtaye namaha Taittiriya Upanishad mayacharya prasadataha Vispashtartha ruchinam hi vyakyeyam sampraniyate Om Sahana bhavatu Sahanau bhunaktu Sahaviryam karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai Om Shanti 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 Om Anando Brahmeti Vyajanat Anandadyeva kalvimani bhutani jayante Anandena jatani jivanti Anandam prayantyabhisham vishantiti Saisha Bhargavi Varuni Vidya Parame Vyoman Pratishtita Ya evam veta pratitishthati Annavan annado bhavati Mahan bhavati prajaya Pashubir brahmavarchasena Mahan Kirtya. So we are in the last leg of this Bhargavi Varuni Vidya. He started with the Anna and then Prana, Manas, then Vijnana. So it ends here, which means he must have found an answer. So now we have to find out how he found an answer. But the fact is, it ends here. The discussion ends here. So let us see what he has been going through. Of course, just to sort of recollect, Bhrgu has progressed through these 4 levels now: the Anna, the Prana, the Manas, and the Vijnana of deep contemplation. Tapas, the nearest translation could be deep contemplation, and the whole contemplation has been done on the basis of some broad directions and instructions his father gave. His father did not do anything more than that. He just gave a few broad ideas and he left it, and left him to reflect and think, and he has gone through the 4. Now I mentioned this in the last class itself, but I want to, because we are probably last time we will discuss this, so I just want to mention this. See, in the 2nd chapter there are Pancha Kosha Vivarana: Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha, Vijnanamaya Kosha, and Anandamaya Kosha. Whereas in this chapter there is no Kosha. I want this part to be understood very clearly. He is not, see, moment you say Kosha, in fact if you remember, at that time I talked about what is the difference between a Koshananda and a Brahmananda. In one class so if the inquiry is in the Kosha, that means it is at the Vyashti level. Whereas here, what did he say? He said, Annam Brahmeti Vyajanat. So the word Annam is a technical word. It's not the uta. It is not the food that we normally understand. Because the food that we understand is a vyashti. This entire discussion is samashti. So his contemplation started here. His contemplation started, if you take Annam Brahmeti Vyajanat, it is not that he started with food. He started with food, but he did not come to that conclusion. When he say Annam Brahmeti Vyajanat, what he said was, of course, he experimented it at his Vyashti level, where without food people, all that we argued. But then he was extending this logic even more, and finally the word Annam he uses is actually Virat, which is the world of food. This food that I eat comes from a world of food. See, every Vyashti has a Samashti. Please understand. This space must come from a world of space. This is a very contrived space called a classroom. To demolish all these, it becomes Samashti. This is now Vyashti. So his argument was started with microcosm. But he didn't stop there. He was applying it. He said if it applies to the second person, if it applies to the third person, if it applies to the fourth person, when he made that kind of an inquiry, he went to Samashti. So Annam Brahmeti Vyajanat, the Annam actually means the Samashti, which is this world of food. The world has, it's nothing but food in many ways. So that is what he meant. And the word used in Vedanta is Virat, which is the Stula Prapancha, this manifested world which supplies food of different kinds. So that is the first meaning of the word Annam. It is not just this. Moment we confine Annam to this, that means we are talking about Vyashti level. Whereas his argument, Bhrgu's argument is Samashti. Similarly, he said Pranam Brahmeti Vyajanat. So the prana is not this Usuru. He started there, of course, and it applies there very much. Not that it doesn't apply at a microcosm level, but his conclusions were after deep contemplation, which he said, let me now empirically generalize it. Let me empirically verify what I found at one unit of observation. And out of that, he said, this prana is the source, is a cosmic prana, from which you have a prana which is, for a particular person. So that cosmic prana is called Hiranyagarbha. Hiranyagarbha manifests, so prana onwards. This has to be understood. Annam is Stula. So Stula Sharira, Stula Prapancha. Moment you step out of Annam, because Annam is the only one which, if you eat more, you get stouter. If you don't eat, maybe you become thinner. It is Stula. We are able to see that's the only one which is material in its nature. We are able to see its vikaras in absolute shape and strength and weight and those kinds of things. Moment you step out of Annam, even in the Panchakosha, moment you come out of Annam and get into Prana and Manas and Vijnana, they are actually Sukshma. It is that subtle body. Let me talk about the Vyashti and then Samashti. If you take an individual, the Annamaya Kosha is what you see outside, which is this 800-pound gorilla that you see with all its flab, which can be trimmed, which can be go to stay fit and then cut it a little bit, all that. So that is the first layer. But moment you take an individual and say Pranamaya Kosha, that is you feel it. You don't see it in perfect shape, na? Prana doesn't have a shape. You can put it into the gas can be enclosed in a shape, and you can approximately say it has that shape. That's all you can do. So it is a little Sukshma. So Pranamaya is a Sukshma Sharira. Manomaya is of course a Sukshma Sharira. Vijnanamaya, which is a Buddhi, intellect, that's also Sukshma Sharira. In the same way, in our conceptualization of this creation process, of how Vyaktis manifest, our argument is for every microcosm there ought to be a macrocosm. There must, because what you see in Anda is what you see in Pinda. Anda and Pinda has a one-to-one mapping. That is our conceptualization. So therefore, there are parallel terms available. And the technical terms are these words which we see in Bhrguvalli. So when you say Annam Brahmet Ivyajanat, that Annam is actually Anda, not the Pinda. It's a Samashti Annam. That is called Virat. It's Stula Prapancha, and therefore from a Stula Prapancha you will get a Stula Sharira. Then comes Prana. Now this Prana, then Manas and Vijnana, these three are characterized by the macrocosm equivalent is called Hiranyagarbha. But then Hiranyagarbha manifests in three ways. Hiranyagarbha can manifest as a Kriya Shakti, which is Prana. It is Prana which enlivens and activates. No? The Prana goes, the action is gone. The final deliverance of the action requires Prana. That's why Hiranyagarbha in its form called Kriya Shakti is the macrocosm of an individual's Prana. Then Hiranyagarbha as Ichha Shakti is the Manas. Because Ichha starts only in the Manas. So this Manas must come from a macrocosm of Manas, which has its own embodiment of Ichha. That Ichha only manifests in small component here. So that is Hiranyagarbha with another dimension called Ichha Shakti. And the Vijnanam Brahmeti Vyajanat, that Vijnanam is Hiranyagarbha in Jnana Shakti. That's why the Ichha Shakti, Kriya Shakti, Jnana Shakti that we say, those are the three equivalent of the macrocosm. And from the macrocosm, when a Vyakti is created, the microcosm is drawn. This is our conceptualization. So those are the words here. So Annam here refers to the macrocosm, Pranam here refers to the macrocosm, Manas here also refers to the macrocosm, and Vijnanam Brahmeti Vyajanat, that Vijnanam is the macrocosm. Of course, he would have started only with him. He would have started only with microcosm. He would have tested it in his case, and he found, then he tried to, in the process of extending the logic, he found this actually belongs to a. So that is why he made that final conclusion. Of course, he again came back and said it cannot be, because of the reasons which he. So I want to just clarify this. This Annam, don't ever imagine this Annam. It's Virat. So in say Pranam, it is not this. Whereas in chapter 2 of Taittiriya Upanishad, it clearly says Kosha. That means the unit of analysis is individual. Because it said Kosha, Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha. So the unit of analysis is each individual. So all discussions pertain only to the individual. So even then, towards the end, it tried to relate it to the macrocosm. That's how they were going. So this one issue I think we must remember. There is this Vyashti versus Samashti technology that we should understand. The Pinda has to draw only from the Anda. So that we have to remember. So he goes on like this, and finally he reaches this last step where he says Anandam. So this Anandam is not Anandamaya anymore. This Anandam he is talking about is a repository of bliss. Because our bliss at a kosha level, the bliss has its own imperfections. I am happy today morning at 8:30, at 8:45 I am sad. Today evening as I am having Tirupati Prasada I am happy. After 1 hour I am sad again. So this Ananda at a unit level is imperfect. Whereas the Anandam that he is talking about is the fullness. So it draws from, so Satyam Jnanam Anantam, from there it is coming. So that is what he found. Because he is stopping here, he says now he never went back to his father. So that shows he got an answer. He never continued the journey of asking this question. So that also indicates that he sort of came to an understanding of something which is the final. So today we need to make sense of it through these mantras. So which is what we will do. But before we do it, I also want to tell two more things about this Bhargavi Varuni Vidya. The first thing is tapas. There is one subtle message coming from this whole exercise, apart from the matter we discuss. which is the specifics of what is Brahman and so on. There is one fundamental message which runs through this. Because I was reading Shankara Bhashya, so I thought I'll quote that sentence. He was making that comment there. So one other message that we have to take from these 5 discussions that has gone is somewhere the tapo brahmheti vyajanat. This is what the father said. Tapasa brahma vijignyasasva tapo brahmheti, all the tapo brahmheti. So the message he says is tapas is perhaps the only method. Tapas is the only method for realizing the ultimate knowledge. That message is sort of running through it. It's not explicitly told, although it is told. We have to understand that. So that is why the father never said anything. Every time when the son came, he was mechanically repeating tapo brahmheti, tapasa brahma vijignyasasva. Go back. Every time he came, he said only that. Tapo brahmheti, tapasa brahma vijignyasasva. So another message that we get out of this Bhargavi Varuni Vidya is in our journey. So you call this ultimate knowledge, the notion of our ultimate knowledge the goalpost can shift until it reaches its destination. But at every point in our life, we have a notion of ultimate knowledge. For some of us, the ultimate knowledge is the knowledge of the job that I do. They may be at a certain level. For some of us, the ultimate knowledge may be a little more than that, whatever it is. But the point is, whatever is your understanding of ultimate knowledge, without tapas, you don't get the knowledge. That is, Shankaracharya says in his Bhashya, I will just read it because I like this sentence. What he says is, Brahma Vijignyasuna, the person who wants to, Jignasa is the desire to know. Vijignyasunaha is one who is desirous of knowing, and if you want to add a vibhakti by that person, then it becomes Vijignyasuna. That person who is desirous of knowing Brahman. This is all in this word. Brahma Vijignyasuna Bhahyanta Karana Samadhana Lakshana. Bahi Tata Antakarana. You have some Bahishkarana, which are all this. Antakarana are all these, So Bhahya Antakarana Samadhana Lakshana. That which actually Samadhana is bringing them to a point of no vibration. It's all otherwise agitating all the time. Sometimes some people are agitating in a physical sense. That means their Bhahya Karana is not in Samadhana. Hyper. They say hyper, na? Some people can't even sit for a moment. They'll keep on, shaking or shifting their legs or, looking around somewhere. These are all Bhahya Karana. Asamadhana. Antakarana is your mind and your thought processes must, slow down. So he says, Bhahya Antakarana Samadhana Lakshana, the one which has the capacity to actually put it at rest. Because if you don't put it at rest, you don't concentrate. Concentration doesn't happen when you are very hyper. That's why I wrote a book on operations management. Since I've been thinking about it too often these days, one global replace, I removed all these words called brainstorming from my book and replaced it with brain stilling. Because I thought storming the brain may not be a good idea. So I checked my entire book, put a global replace, I removed the word brainstorming and replaced it with brain stilling. If you still the brain, sometimes you may get some clarity of thought. So he says that brain stilling is actually, Antakarana Samadhana Lakshana. Samadhana process. That Lakshana Parama Tapaha, he says that Lakshana ultimately is with tapas. So he says, Brahma Vijignyasuna Bhahyantakarana Samadhana Lakshana Paramatapaha Paramam Tapaha Sadhanam Anušteyam iti. So he says, in order to know the Brahman, use this vehicle called tapas. That's the only way. That's what he's saying through this Sanskrit shloka, sentence which he writes at the end of all these, he writes this particular sentence. So I only want to say, whatever be our notion of ultimate knowledge, I think we need tapas. Tapas is that ekagrata, our ability to channelize our vital energy into, it's like putting this lens and then getting the sunlight on to, you can actually burn a metal. With that concentration, you can burn a metal. We actually cook our food also using the same process here. We only put a parabolic reflector and collect steam out of it. That is tapas. So he says, whatever is our notion of ultimate knowledge, tapas, that's why tapas is considered to be a very nice thing, even for a materialistic world. I always say, successful execution of a terrorist operation requires tapas. Not possible otherwise. You need tapas. Such a concentration you need. The cause may be not good. Now what I am talking about is our ability to succeed requires that focus. So that tapas is another message which is coming through these texts. Okay, so we will, with this preamble, we will see the last passage that he is going through. Anando brahmeti vyajanat. So in the same way, he did his own calculation and contemplation and so on. He said, Ananda, Brahma. See, Ananda is Ananda, because Brahma is in masculine. That's why using an adjective which is masculine. Otherwise you should say Anandam. So it is Ananda. Brahma Anandaha. Brahma Anandaha iti Vyajanat. He finally came to the conclusion, Brahman is nothing but this bliss or Ananda or whatever it is. He uses the same argument. Anandat hi eva kalu imani bhutani jayante. So all these utpatti happens because of Ananda. Anandena jatani jivanti. The sustenance of all these world of multiplicity happens because of Anandam. And Anandam prayanti abhisambhishanti. So when this creation wants to get back, it gets back into Anandam only. So in the same way, yes, I have only again done a global replay. I removed prana and put Ananda and then got it. So now let's try to understand this. Now let us start this whole piece of Anandam. And I am sure Bhrgu would have actually, as I said in the earlier case also, he would have started, and it is good for us to start with us as the unit of analysis. We have to start with our unit of analysis. So first of all, we know that happiness is a fleeting experience for us. This is the reality for all of us. In fact, that's why in Bhagavad Gita is said, matra sparshast kaunteya sitoshna sukha dukkataha agamapainaha. They have a habit of coming and going. Sukha as well as dukkha, both. Agamapainaha anityaha. So our thing says sukha as well as ananda, sukha in a analogous term I am using, happiness, bliss, or satisfaction, tranquility. You use a set of words that you want to use. We all know that it is actually a fleeting experience for us. I mean, that is our challenge. That is exactly our challenge. That is a fundamental lifetime preoccupation for us. What is our lifetime preoccupation? You say whatever, you know what is our lifetime preoccupation? We are bothered about this idea that the peace, tranquility, happiness is a fleeting experience. It is not an experience which stays for a long. I mean, the only time when it possibly stayed, I mean, there are several examples. We have any number of examples. I received a pay hike. How long will it stay? I received a Padma Bhushan, let us say, because that is the flavor of the season now. Okay? Let's say I received a Padma Shri or a Padma Bhushan. Instead of one day, it may be 1 week, maybe 10 days. Then life as usual, all your grief starts. And, the slightest provocation is enough for you to sulk.
Why not
Bharat Ratna also. Let us be more generous. Bharat Ratna, a Nobel, whatever, we'll add all of them. One slightest reason is enough for us to sulk. Sulking is our mind's habit. Slightest reason is enough. In fact, this is something which all we have this experience. There is somebody with us, there is so much of understanding and everything goes well. One thing they did, perhaps they didn't do wrong. Suddenly we develop such a misunderstanding about that person, our world view changes about that person. So this mind is trained like that. So, it's a huge, cheater in this whole scheme of things, that all these, I receive a pay hike, I got a promotion or a recognition of sorts, however big the recognition is, or I stood first in the state on some PUC exam. How long it is going? Tell me how many of those people are happy? No, it is not possible. You bring all your list of happiness, they are all transient. We have this experience. So what is this Anandam he is talking about? We have to first sort out. We have to get a greater clarity of what is being talked about. Only then we will be able to resolve. So the point is, so the reason, let us now ask. I stood first in the state. Why did I become? Why did the happiness not stay? In all these examples, I got a Bharat Ratna. Why did the happiness not stay? This is a question. If we are able to answer the question, we would have gone to the root of the matter. Or, something very good happened, I got a very good recognition. Why is it that that happiness did not stay with me? Ideally, it should have stayed with me. Because at that moment, I thought I was on the top of the world. No? I thought I have achieved, particularly for a person who worked very hard. Let us take a very genuine case. A person worked very hard and put in a lot of effort. It was rewarded. And once it was amply rewarded, more than God has been, by his side, let us say, that person has been amply rewarded. He got a recognition which is the highest in the world. Technically speaking, that person should never have grief in his rest of his life. That's not the case. It's not possible. You bring one person like that, we will all change our name. That's not possible. All that we can say is he was happy for a day, for a week, for 10 days, maybe for a few months, and that's it. Even that continuous is not possible. So the question is, we have to now go to the root of this question. I mean, this is a lifetime problem for us. I think we will forget this passage. I think we need to discuss this. Why is it that happiness is not staying with me? This is a question that we need to really go and ask. So, I was just thinking about this question. Now, the first thing it appears to me is we are, as an ordinary individual, yet to evolve. When I say ordinary individual, we are still not evolved. We have our own journey in which all of us are evolving. We are all in our own journey. Okay? So, from 0 we have not gone to 1. We have taken a membership between 0 and 1. That's all I mean when I say we are all evolving. Right? I realize there are two things which are very, very characteristic of all of us, which may actually cause this. First thing is our inherent nature. Okay? Our inherent nature is to identify moment you reach a state. See, getting the award is I have reached a certain state. Physical or mental state, definitely I am talking about the mental state. Physical state, do not know, certainly mental state. I stood first. That's a mental state. So, we are this divinity, this Prakriti has wired something in us. And it is asking us to escape from that. That's why I am saying all this. Normally we are wired like that. Moment our inherent nature is to identify what I call it a so-called state of imperfection in anything that we are. This is what we are wired. So, getting that award tonight was a temporary position of perfection in which I am standing. Tomorrow morning my mind will become unhappy because mind somehow thinks this is not the state of perfection. This is what is happening actually. Otherwise, why would I be sulking? Why should I be looking at something else? See, when will you stop looking for something? We will stop looking for something when we have achieved the last or the perfect thing. I mean, it's a simple logic. So the very fact that my happiness is fleeting is an indication that we seem to have been wired into a way by which anything that you give, after staying there for a while, this is like a child. The child, if you give a new toy, we are inherently wired like that. So when you give a new toy, the child keeps it for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, sometimes 2-3 days. then it loses its sheen. You can't do, at least, a few times you could have given food without trouble. That's the end of the story. I'm sure you will agree. So after that it's gone. Because the child is thinking that this is not satisfying what it is looking for. We are no different from the child. So that award that we got was okay on that day. 2 days later it says, no, this is not what it is. We were not saying it openly. But that is why we are actually started sulking, finding fault, enduring and enduring for something else and so on. So first thing, couple of examples of how momentary state of perfection we will reach and how that will disappear. Just think about the situation. 3 of us are there. There is a child with me, my child with me. 3 of us are there. We are actually wanting to go to Tirupati or something. I go to the Alipuri bus stand. There, what is the state of perfection? How do you chase and jump and get the seat? There is a lot of energy put in. You calculate, but different people, it may differ in, all of them have the same idea. So that temporary state of perfection and the kind of satisfaction you have when you are able to jump ahead of others and got the 3 seats for you. Just imagine this possibility. But that is such a narrow piece of thing that in 2 minutes that is gone now. Now we will start, that is gone. That satisfaction, I don't know where it disappeared. That satisfaction, peace, tranquility, happiness, bliss, you put all these words are all in the same bucket. It goes, it simply goes. But at that time, that was the definition of happiness or perfection. So that brings us the second point. So divinity has wired something else also to you. One more example I will take. In India-Pakistan one-day international match, right? And I want to actually go and sit in the stadium, buy the ticket. Look at the kind of, until we call somebody, we know somebody, let him call him, and see the way it works. It works, and then we make sure that we got it, we bend. Once you sit there, for some time it is there. So this is what I mean by saying, so these 2 examples are pointing to the second thing which actually divinity has wired into us also. And what is the second thing? Second thing is, the mind is inherently tuned to chase and go after perfection. So there are two things required. One, you should recognize a state of imperfection. Now if you recognize a state of imperfection, but you don't have a capability to actually go after it, life is very, very challenging. Life can be very depressing. You recognize a state of imperfection, but you don't know how to reach that. Even these simple things, catching a bus, sitting a seat also belongs to this framework only. Some of them look bigger, some of them look smaller. So to that extent, how long you stay in that period of happiness is a function of that. The framework is no different. So our mind, so we are wired into 2 things. Constantly look for a state of imperfection. And then chase, have a mechanism, which is what the mind does. The mind rallies itself, puts all its efforts possible, and then try to reach that state of perfection. And once it reaches the state of perfection, the mind kicks the next subroutine. It says, find the next imperfection in the story. This is how we seem to be actually leading our life. And this is why no joy will be permanent with us. Because this is what is happening. So if you continue this argument, then there ought to be, if you keep on doing it, recursively do it, improve it, logically speaking, there must be one state after which you need not have to do it. So this shifting goalpost, you can shift the goalpost up to the extent ground is there. After that, how do you shift the goalpost? So once you reach a certain thing, the goalpost is no longer required. You'll remove the goalpost. So the shifting goalpost will go. So logically, there is going to be a state which is called the state of perfection. Now if you are in a state of perfection, then 2 things will happen. The mind will not start chasing, because what is there to chase? Mind will not start chasing. Secondly, you will not come out of happiness. You cannot come out of happiness, no, because you reach. The problem with us now is, we realize as soon as we reach what we called as perfection, mind immediately says, this is not perfection. This is not perfection, it is so imperfect. So, another way in Vedanta they say, that's why if you read different bhashyas in different ways, you will find, a person who is evolved is a perfect person. What do you mean by perfect person? That means he has understood and reached that state of perfection, and once you reach the state of perfection, that's it. There is nothing, there is no, half happiness and half, all those are not possible. You may go through a world of experience, that is different. Experience, going through situations is one. That's why, I frequently say, pain is one, suffering is different. You are not, relieved of pain, but you are relieved of suffering. Because you now developed a new framework in which all these pales in comparison, therefore you will go through it, but it will not map on the mind. That Anandam is what he reached. So this word Anandam is that Anandam. That is what he must have, contemplated this, tested this notion of happiness. It is fleeting, it cannot be fleeting. You went on trying to do this and do again and again and again. We must be, all of us must be able to reach one day. That one day when it comes, I have no idea. But one day when you move this 1 inch at a time, you have to reach the destination. And when you reach the state of perfection, you cannot slip from the state of happiness, or the state of bliss, or tranquility, or fulfillment, or shanti, samriddhi, whatever word, amritam, whatever you want to use, all those words make sense there. So the only way, so all this is only saying that the only way we have a non-fleeting experience of happiness, not the fleeting experience. The only way to have a non-fleeting experience of happiness is to know what is quote unquote perfect. What is that state of perfection, and find a way to reach that state. Now, see, when I was a student, that's about 30 years back, there was a bestseller, 1 million copies already sold. That book was called Jonathan Livingstone Seagull, Richard Bach. It was a very famous book when we, such a small 65 pages. In fact, at that time I used to read Bhagavad Gita, but I found actually this was better than Bhagavad Gita for me. Same idea was there in that book. It is 65 pages. It will take not more than 1.5 hours to read. Because out of 65 pages, some 25 pages are only, these seagull photos. One big seagull, flying, a small seagull flying. That was how that book was. And many times I have read that book. So if I recollect that book, the book has according to me, 3 chapters. There are 3 chapters. But to me, there are 3 stages which it is talking about. The idea was very simple. See, seagulls are all low-flying birds. They prey on small little things, low-flying. So there is one seagull by name Jonathan. So this Jonathan, one day what it did was, it wanted to test the limit of its capability. In fact, we are all supposed to be Jonathans. Because we are supposed to break the barrier and break the boundary and go. That's what a tapas will help. A tapas will help to break the barrier. Otherwise, you'll never be able to break the barrier. Tapas will help break the barrier. So this Jonathan, what it does is, it starts flying a little higher. It flies much higher. So the first chapter talks about all those. It is very nicely written. So the message in the first chapter is that this Jonathan became out of the ordinary. This seagull called Jonathan became out of the ordinary because it is able to fly higher, much higher, and so on. Then the second chapter is very interesting. Second chapter is this seagull develops a lot of ego. Oh, I am now, I can fly this height, I can go this fast, and so on. It thought it has reached the end of the world. Then one day it found there was another seagull flying above it. It's already at a tremendous height and a tremendous speed. Then it finds, I don't remember, Chen or something, I don't remember the other name. There is another seagull flying. So this fellow becomes, now the humility comes. So the second chapter is all about, this fellow starts taking lesson from that. And that's an interesting chapter to read. because it asks the other seagull, the seagull says you have to fly this fast, then it says what is perfection? There is a question. This Jonathan asks, is it so many miles per hour? These kinds of questions. That seagull will say perfection is a state of being. These kinds of sentences are there. So it tells all that. That's the second. So at the end of the second chapter, this Jonathan is a very evolved Jonathan now. Not only it is out of the ordinary, it is Jnani. Because it has lost its ego, it has understood that perfection is not confined to so many kilometers or so many height or so many speed. How do you dive? It realized they are not perfection. Perfection is a mental state of being. So that is the equivalent. Then the third chapter is very important, very interesting also. See, there is a difference between Hamsa and Paramahamsa. A Hamsa is a realized individual. Now, the realized individual, after it realized, it could have just gone. A Paramahamsa is one who says, it's not only important that I must be realized, I want to get all. The shining example of that is Ramanujacharya. He said, even if I have to go to hell, let me go to hell. That's okay. I will get all these people there. So in the third chapter of that Jonathan Livingston seagull, it talks about how it came back to the seagull community and said, boss, this is not what it is. You have not experienced and seen what is called perfection. So that is what, I think that one book is enough to explain what is Anandam. So Anandam is a state of being, and once we have reached that, then these experiences that are happening will continue to come and go. But it will not map. The mind that is wired with these two imperfections, these imperfections are the only ways by which we reach perfection. They may look imperfect, but that's a tool to get us to perfection. To always find everything imperfect and then endeavor to make it perfection may appear imperfect, but that is a tool with which the perfection is to be reached. So Vedanta calls this state where we have reached there, where we have understood perfection, is that knowledge is called Paravidya. Mundaka Upanishad beautifully starts with that only. Paravidya and Aparavidya is the starting shloka in Mundaka Upanishad. Kasmin vijñāte sarvamitam vijñātam bhavati. That's a question. And these Upanishads are ruthless sometimes. So it says all Rigveda, Yajurveda, Veda, this, that, Shadangas, everything it says is, Aparavidya. All these it says is Aparavidya. Mundaka Upanishad says like that. So the Paravidya is that knowledge, and that knowledge which gives us that state which is a Jnana Nishta or a Brahma Nishta. You stay put in that. And once you have reached it, we may be able to engage in the world of Vyavahara, but it will not affect us anymore. So such a person need not have to withdraw and go away. The person may be part of the system, but the system signals will not go in. So he will, in Bhagavad Gita it says, Atmanyeva, Atmaratihi, Tasya Karyam na Vidyate. He says, Na Prajahati Kaman, that Sita Prajnasya Kabasha, there is a definition. He says he will revel in himself within. You don't know what is happening to him outside. The outside world, he will be responding to what is required. If something is hit, he will apply ointment or something. But he is not going to suffer, he is not going to worry. Inside is very different from outside. That state this Bhrgu must have reached. On contemplating, verifying, testing, going after it. This is not Ananda. What is this Ananda? And so on and so on and so forth. He must have come to the conclusion, you reach Anandam only when you touched perfection. And once you have touched perfection, once you have that experience, you can come back to this state, but you will be in that awareness with which you will work. This is like, knowing how to operate something and operating, and not knowing something to operate and operating. On the outside, both of them look like people who know how to operate. But the mental disposition is very different. Person who knows has a very different approach to touching that equipment or fixing something as opposed to the other one. That is what I am sure Bhrgu would have really gone through in terms of... so that is why he says, come to that conclusion, because he didn't continue after this. Since he did not continue after it, then it must be ultimate, and simply Anandam will be only a non-fleeting, non-changing experience to only that person who reach the state of perfection. Until then we will be sulking, we will have reasons to go back to, packets of unhappiness and depression and anger, all those will, start blowing hot and cold.
There is nothing like partly evolved in the part.
No, binary.
Unfortunately, there is nothing like that, sir. Although sometimes we think like that, I think there is nothing like that. You are evolved or you are not evolved, you are in the process of evolving.
That's all.
That's why, you can be building the house and then the house is built. There is nothing like, half-built house is actually process of building. So it's a process of evolution. The process of getting perfect is there. Once somebody is perfect, then all these are not there. So the Anandam that he is using here is not an adjective. Normally happiness is an adjective for us. Bliss, happiness, fulfillment, satisfaction, all these are adjectives. Now it cannot. Because moment it is an adjective, that means it is used to describe something. The something is different from that. You are temporarily latching this property onto it, and because you put that adjective, there could be technically a situation where it may go out of it for some time. Adjective takes only a temporary kind of, it is only, see, if you can describe myself in a particular way, why do you need an adjective? If you use an adjective, you are turning me into something else. You are adding a little more into it, and then, so which means that's not my inherent nature, it has morphed for the moment. That may be the reason we use an adjective. So anything that is a property will point to something, but it is not something. It is only point to something. So which means there is now a second entity other than that. Moment you reach that state, then Brahman is not there. Because it is Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam. Anantam, moment you say Anantam, there cannot be a second. It can be multiple manifestations. See, what hydrogen and oxygen can manifest in any number of ways. Hydrogen can be hugely combustible, oxygen can be even more combustible and aiding combustion. Hydrogen and oxygen put together can put down combustion. Manifestations are all possible. But it must be hydrogen and oxygen alone. So there can be vikaras, counter properties when you combine. But the original thing must be the same. That is the property of Brahman. So the moment you use an adjective, then it cannot be Brahman. So Anandam cannot be an adjective. Because the tallness is being attributed to him. So he is no different from tallness. You are attaching that to it. There ought to be something other than tallness. That will not work. If then the notion of Brahman will go. And it will be subject to a beginning and end. All that can happen with an adjective. And subject to modifications and so on. So therefore, in this text, Anandam is not an adjective. That's why perfection is a state of being. Perfection is not an adjective. It is a state of being. So Anandam is a state of being. It is not an adjective or an additional property that I can attach to you for the moment, or suddenly I can attach now and so on. So that is the conceptualization we should understand when this word Anandam is used here. It cannot be having beginning and end, so on. That's why I just picked up these shlokas from Purushottama Yoga in Bhagavad Gita. What is he saying? Dvau imau. So dvavimau. In Sandhi it becomes dvavimau. Dvau imau purusho. So these are all dvivachana. Two. It is talking about two. Dvau imau purusho loke. Kshara cha akshara eva cha. So it comes so beautifully in these two shlokas. He says in this world there are two purushas. Kshara purusha and akshara purusha. There are two purushas. Okay? Ksharaha sarvani bhutani. This Annamaya kosha, no, that is all these Annamaya Pranamaya, these four koshas, they are Kshara, because one day it will go, na? That's what we have been so far arguing. Bhrgu came to that conclusion only. One day it will all go. Abrahma bonan loka punaravartino arjuna. From Brahma onwards they will all go one day and come back later. So they are all Kshara Purushas. Kshara sarvani bhutani, but Kutastha, the substratum on which this prana came, the substratum on which this manas came, the substratum on which this flesh and bone came and started growing, there is some substratum that's called Kutastha. Kutastha, the nearest English word is anvil. So it's a substratum. You need an anvil on which you have to put a metal and then hit it and change the shape. So that is a substratum. So the Kutastha is Akshara, which is that Linga Sharira. It will go. But it may go out of the body, but it has not disappeared. Like that is the God particle. So the God particle which is there in every one of us is the Akshara Purusha. The Pancha Koshas are all Kshara Purushas because they have a beginning and they have an end that is imperfect, they have varying, subject to modifications and so on and so forth. So that's what he says. Then he says, Uttamaha Purushaha tu Anyaha. So there is a third entity now called Uttama Purusha. That's why this chapter is called Purushottama Yoga. This is the title song for the chapter. Okay? Uttamaha Purushaha tu Anyaha. Paramatma iti Udahritaha. So that is this Anandam. This Anandam is the primordial source which will create the world. Yatova imani bhutani jayante yena jatani jivanti yat prayanti abhisham vishanti. So there is one primordial source from which everything will come. The universe will come, the Brahman will come, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva will come, Devas will come, the Vayu will come, Indra will come, Varuna will come. Then Abrahma Bonan Loka will be one day folded in. It takes back. So the origin of universe and all that belongs to this. So that is Uttama Purusha. Purushanam Uttamaha. There are three Purushas now. Kshara Purusha, Akshara Purusha, and there is a third Purusha. Since the third Purusha is superior to all the three, that's why he is called Uttama Purusha. So Uttama Purushaha tu Anyaha Paramatma iti. The word we use to indicate that is called Paramatma. See, Paramatma is attributeless. It is not, Saguna. It is Nirguna. It is a concept. Satyam, Jnana. Swarupa Lakshana is Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, Brahma. Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam has no attribute, no? There is no shape. Satyam has no shape, Jnanam has no shape, Anantam has no shape. It is Nirguna. So that is what it is. So it says, Uttama Purushaha tu Anyaha, Paramatma iti Udahridaha, Yaha Lokatrayam Avishya, it spreads into these whole three worlds. The three world is not necessarily, it doesn't mean the, Bhur, Bhuva, Swaha. The three world actually means present, future and past. Those are the three worlds. The present, the past and the future. That is the actual meaning of three world here. Okay? Lokatrayam avishya bibardhyati avyayaha ishwaraha. That is the Ishwara. It supports. It actually, sustains these three worlds of Desha, Kala, Vastu. Everything is created out. That is Anandam. A person who reaches a state of perfection will actually know that. Will actually found that is a perfect knowledge. Then lots of confusions are resolved. Lots of confusions exist. They do exist, but they stop mapping. They start mapping onto an individual. Therefore, it cannot create those ripple effect. The ripple effect will not be there. In other words, you connect the ECG machine to your, put all those electrodes and put it, it will start showing all these, but then if it is feeding to a database, pull the wire. So it will not populate the database. So it will keep going like this. It will not populate the database at the back. Because, that perfection is understood, it's not required. The umbilical cord is cut. I don't need it anymore. That feeling will come. So that's what these two shlokas are also saying. So it is talking about something permanent, not something fleeting, not something which will keep changing now and then. In Chandogya Upanishad, it's beautiful shloka. I keep teaching it to some of the top management. I say, you read this. Because it says, Rishi is telling, what is Rishi saying? Yovai bhuma tat sukam. He says, happiness is in large, big things. This is what our CEOs need to know. Don't go after small things. Nalpe sukhamasti. That's what he says. See, what is he saying? Na alpe sukhamasti. There is no charm in small little things. Indian entrepreneurs and startup giants must understand this. Nalpe sukhamasti. Bhuma vai sukham. Yo bhumaiva sukham. Bhuma tu eva vijñāsitavya. Therefore, go after that big. That big is perfection. So that the Rishi tells the student, there is no charm in small little things because they are all fleeting. They'll have an end. Then you will get into, a bit of unhappiness. He says, go after big things. Yovai bhuma tat sukam, nalpe sukam asti, bhumaiva sukam, bhuma tu eva vijignyasitavyaha. That is the one which ought to be known. iti. That's what the Guru said. Then hey Bhagavan, Bhagavaha, Bhuman Vijijnasa. Let me go after this big, is what the student immediately sort of replies. Now this definition of Bhuma is given in the next shloka. Yatra na anyat pashyati, na anyat shrunoti, na anyat vijanati, saha Bhuma. Ata yatra anyat pashyati, anyat shrunoti, anyat vijanati, tad alpam. In Bhrihadaranyaka Upanishad also same mantra comes in that chapter which we recited is there. The third chapter, this will be there. So there is a nice passage in which Yajnavalkya talks about this. So that which cannot be heard. Why you can't be heard? Because you are everything. That perfection, if it can spread the whole world, if there is no second, what are you going to hear? If there is no second, what are you going to see? Moment you see, then there is a dhyaya, dhyana, or there is a rupam, drishta, deyam. So he says, everything is one. Moment you understand that oneness, then that is this perfection, that is the big. As long as you see, I am different from this is different from that, I am okay, you are not okay, you are closer, I am not closer, I will get the hell out of you, I will make life miserable for you. Those are all the alpam. He says, moment you start seeing differences, that means you are in a state of alpam. So that's what he says. Yat ata yatra anyat pashyati, anyat shrunoti, anyat vijanati, tad alpam. Yovai bhuma tad amritam. Yad alpam tad martyam. See strong words. Bhuma is immortality. That perfection is immortality. The small little things, you will also perish along with that. That's the idea. You will also perish. You will eat your own life into it. That's why he says. So that's the definition he gives between alpam and martyam. So all these must have gone behind his mind. When Bhrgu said Anandam Brahmeti Vyajanat, he hit on this, jackpot, which is perfection. Because it is only after perfection we can remain in a state of happiness. And if that perfection is Brahman, then the whole Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahman is what he actually found, which is what chapter 2 started with. Brahmavit apnoti param. That's what he actually stumbled on by this kind of a. So therefore he is not going to his father anymore. He is not asking his father anymore. He is reveling in that kind of a. So it ends. So the only two possibilities for the word Anandam. One is happiness or bliss, which we thought it is fleeting, but there may be a possibility. Actually, somebody said Anandam as a word, Sanskrit word. Ananda is nothing but the, Ananta Tattva is Ananda. This is called, what do you call this? There is one, Taddita. This is called Taddita. Varunasya Patyam Varuni. Lavanasya Bhavaha Lavanyam. So Anantasya Bhavaha Anantam. So it has to be endless. It should not have an end. Very word Anandam conveys that it is endless. That is the meaning of the word Anandam. We wanted to say that endless is happiness. That's why we have taken a derived meaning out of it. So Anandam is Anantatva Bhava, is Anandam. So that is what it is, and that is exactly Brahman. And it doesn't require any support. It doesn't require any substratum. It is independent of its existence and all that. So Bhrgu must have stumbled on this great thought after enormous amount of thinking and tapas, which would have done for years. I do not know. Time scale is not available there. In another Upanishad, time scale is available. Every 25 years they were asked to go and come and so on. Saisha Bhargavi Varuni Vidya Parame Vyoman Pratishtita Ya Evam Veda Pratitishthati. He says, this indeed is this Bhargavi Varuni. It's a conclusion to these 6 Anuvakas, which is the father-son conversation. So it says, Saisha Bhargavi Varuni Vidya. This is indeed what is called the Bhargavi Varuni Vidya. It is called Bhargavi because Bhrgu learnt it. It is called Varuni because Varuna propelled him with a certain direction. So it's called Bhargavi Varuni Vidya. Parame Vyoman Pratishtita. That Brahman which he identified is In second chapter also it said that Yo Veda Nihitam Guhayam Parame Vyoman So Oshnute Karman Sarvan Kamaan Saha. That's what it said in chapter 2. So it is this particular Brahman, this Anandam is available everywhere. And it is in Parame Vyoman, in that space. That ultimate space is also in the cave of the heart, which is what chapter 2 said. Yo Veda Nihitam Guhayam Parame Vyoman. That's what it said in chapter 2. So the Parame Vyoman, we can take Nihitam Guhayam also. That happiness, we are nothing but embodiment of perfection and happiness. This is what Vedanta says. That's what Vivekananda again and again used to say. You are nothing but embodiment of perfection. We are operating in a domain of imperfection. So the whole journey is to wriggle ourselves out of these imperfection. We are shackled with imperfection, which with our own mental models. The whole journey in Vedanta is a journey to unshackle us from it and discover happiness and perfection which we are. That's why Vivekananda says man is potentially divine. Vayam sarve amartya putraha. Shvetashvara Upanishad says Vayam sarve amartya putraha. We are of children of immortality. We don't know it because it's all camouflaged and then we take it to be something else and we keep doing things. Vedanta actually helps us discover this with these kinds of discussions. I think we'll stop here. There are a couple of, there is a sort of a small Palashruti kind of a thing is there, which we will take in the next class and then continue with three nice Anuvakas on Annam. Annam na Nindyat, Annam Bahu Kurvita, Annam, there are three of them with that. Yeah? Okay. You can copy it. See users live stream.
Stop, right?
Yeah, you stop it and save it. Post it. It will ask, do you have to post? You just say yes.
Are you sure you want to end your broadcast? Yes.